Georges de Latour Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon, our pride and joy here at Beaulieu Vineyard, and a wine that truly put the Napa Valley on the map many, many decades ago when it was first released with the 1936 vintage. So the story of this iconic wine starts with that 36 vintage, which actually was known as having tremendous quality overall. Most of you have probably heard of an iconic winemaker named André Tchelistcheff, who joined us here at Beaulieu in 1938. One of the first things that André did upon his arrival here at Beaulieu was to taste through the 1936 vintage, which was still in tank at the time. And he identified very quickly that not only was there tremendous quality, but he learned that our founder, Georges de Latour himself, wanted to create a flagship Cabernet under the Beaulieu Vineyard label. This would be a perfect vintage to start with because of that inherent quality. So he selected his very favorite lots, and he held them for an additional year before blending and bottling in 1939. Now, when they first bottled that first vintage, the 1936 Georges de Latour Private Reserve, they actually didn't have a name for it yet that had stuck. So it was actually entered into a local wine competition in San Francisco under the name of BV Special Burgundy, actually, which was tasted by a panel of judges who looked at each other and said, wow, this is the best quality we have ever seen coming out of the Napa Valley for any wine. Now, 1940, when that first vintage was released, happened to be the year that Georges de Latour, our founder, passed away. And so they decided to name the wine in Georges de Latour's honor, and boom, you had the birth of Georges de Latour Private Reserve that we have, of course, been making famously since 1936. Now, because of that wonderful quality that we saw with the first vintage, the wine gained fame very quickly after its release. So it was truly a new benchmark and standard of quality coming out of the Napa Valley. And you had, this level of winemaking that would only increase from there. And everybody was looking at this wine as really that standard and that benchmark. By the Second World War era, this wine had become the primary wine served at all White House functions, state dinners, etc., and remained there for many, many decades after that. I love tasting through back vintages because you notice very, very quickly that there is this core and the central DNA of wonderful Rutherford terroir that very much exists through all of those decades. We own and farm just under 500 acres here in the Rutherford district alone. Many of those vineyards and those vineyard blocks are the same exact vineyards that were being used back in that first vintage of Georges de Latour Private Reserve. So for that reason, you taste through the vintages, you notice that, okay, there's changes in weather patterns and winemaking technology, etc. You look through that and you get this core of consistency, which is very much the terroir and the sense of place that this beautiful wine has to offer. And it's one of the most pleasurable things to enjoy and to look at as a winemaker. Now, in terms of winemaking philosophy when it comes to this wine, we are very consistent with what André Tchelistcheff was doing all of those years ago, which is to basically best express our greatest asset, which are our vineyards and our wonderful terroir that we're so blessed to have. So when the grapes are received at the winery, we use the latest and greatest technology to ensure that only the very, very best berries make it into the fermentation tank. Interestingly, Georges de Latour Private Reserve also utilizes a pretty big portion of barrel fermentation on the skins. And that's where I will take a standard 225 liter or 60 US gallon French oak barrel. I will remove the heads, and then I will crush about 400 pounds of optically sorted fruit into that barrel. I will then put the head back on the barrel, and we have a special rack system with wheels on them where the barrels will go through fermentation, and we will roll them during that process to make sure to get the proper extraction from the skins, the right concentration that we want. Now, the benefit of doing this, because believe me, it is tremendously labor intensive compared to the more traditional ways of fermenting Cabernet. The benefits are really that you're getting early oak integration, you're getting that early integration of wood tannin, which is going to help with your power, your complexity, and your ageability, but you're also getting extraction of a lot of those non-fermentable sugars that exist in oak. And those are adding kind of this fleshiness and this plush character that covers up some of the harsher, younger tannins. And so you've checked both boxes where you can create a wine at this level that is very, very ageable. You've added tannin concentration, ageability, but you've also added this layer of approachability that allows the wine to be enjoyed a little bit earlier in its youth, but also has additional power that will help you age it for many, many decades to come, sometimes 50 to 60 years. So when I taste this iconic wine, I think about many things, such as what would Georges de Latour think, or what would André Tchelistcheff think? These are both pioneers that really created so much of what we enjoy today in the Napa Valley. I take my role as a huge honor, but also as a big responsibility to make sure that we are always putting our best foot forward in terms of best expressing our unique and beautiful terroir that we are so blessed to have here at Beaulieu Vineyard. We first notice the color. There's tremendous concentration here, a beautiful red hue, deep, dark, concentrated. On the nose, first thing you notice is this intense blackberry, this cassis, this forest floor, this Rutherford dust. You can almost smell the soil of Rutherford bursting out of this glass. Take a sip and you will notice the huge concentration, the aging potential, and the multi-layers of complexity that are enjoyed in this wine, but also the fact that there's this broad and fleshy mid-palate. You also get that textural component of the Rutherford dust. So again, that cocoa powder texture and flavor associated with it that really broadens, particularly on the mid palate, and lengthens into the finish of this wine. And this is another vintage that will go down in the history books. This is in fact history in a glass that we're drinking right here.